Speaking of the MCU universe, we're gonna have to go to their version of Civil War, which was a loose adaptation of the 2006 comic arc of the same name. In that comic, it's centered around the idea of pro versus anti-registration sides after a disaster that caused the death of many civilians. The film would center largely around the idea that there should be superhero accords, so kind of the same concept, but also detoured a bit onto Steve Rogers and his need to keep Bucky Barnes safe. That was a huge part of that movie. It was a lot of why he was anti-accord. It was. This film would culminate in the reveal, for Tony at least, that the Winter Soldier, aka the aforementioned Bucky Barnes, was the person who had killed his parents. This causes him to go off the deep end because he was not the most stable person in this movie. He would end up battling full out with the Winter Soldier and Captain America, and we would get actually an admittedly very cool fight scene where the two teamed up to take him down. This climactic battle would result in a moment that in my theater at least actually elicited audible gasps from the audience. It's the moment where at the end, Captain America brings down his shield right down the center of Iron Man's chest, right where his arc reactor used to be, which a few films earlier would have killed him, and even then leaves him there in the cold, in that hideout with no power. It was an intense moment. Defeated, and he lost his friends. I mean, although he had been imprisoning them, it was not the best look for Tony in either Civil War. This movie would divide fans into pro Iron Man and pro Cap camps for quite a while. Number 9, Original Sin, aka Original Retcons. This was a Marvel event from 2014, wherein it was revealed that there were secrets in the Marvel Universe, original sins, because we were playing upon the biblical allegory here. So, what was Iron Man's original sin? Well, it was revealed that he had tampered with the gamma bomb that had caused Bruce Banner to become the Hulk. And when Bruce figures this out, he is of course enraged. So he manages to get a hold of some extremist tech so that he can hold on to his Bruce Banner consciousness when he transforms into the Hulk, so that he can go and confront Tony properly. And confront him he does, taking out his Hulkbuster armor in literally one punch. Just one punch. He was the One Punch Man. Tony survives the fight by running away to get more armor. A loss or a strategic retreat? You decide. Number 8, Thor. After the comic book Civil War, a lot of heroes had some strong feelings towards Tony. I mean, Thor ended up being cloned by Reed in this arc. Just they needed a big, heavy muscle guy on their team, so they cloned Thor. Nobody likes being cloned without their consent. I mean, Tony was creating alternate dimension prisons. It was just not going well. After this, him and Thor would end up getting into it. And it's important to remember here that Thor is indeed a god, and Tony is a guy in some really souped up armor, which he actually has to remind Thor of because Thor is dismantling him so thoroughly, throwing him up into the air, ripping his mask off, just pieces coming off everywhere. He needs to be calmed down because that could have gone pretty intensely. He made his point though, and for many fans they felt it was a take that Tony moment, because after Civil War there was a lot of take that Tony, despite the fact that reviews said that the comic was balanced and nuanced, which I think if it had been, there wouldn't have been as much take that Tony.
Coming in at number 7, we have the time that Iron Man flew a nuke through a wormhole. The end of the original Avengers film is one of the defining moments of the MCU, as Earth's mightiest heroes finally team up for the first time to put an end to Loki's Chitauri invasion in New York City. Faced with overwhelming odds, Tony Stark was ready to sacrifice himself by flying a nuclear missile launched by S.H.I.E.L.D., intended to take out the infection in New York, and instead shooting it through the wormhole to the Chitauri mothership. And while Tony would be lucky enough to survive the explosion and fall through the wormhole back to Earth, he would remain traumatized by these events for years to come, suffering from both survivor's guilt and existential terror at just how big the threats from beyond the stars could become. Totally not foreshadowing for Thanos, right?
Number 6, Rogue. This comes to us from X-Men Legacy 267. This was during the whole Avengers versus X-Men arc lead up surrounding everything. This is where the Phoenix Force and Hope Summers were viewed as the saviors of mutant kind. However, by other heroes it was viewed as more of a threat because, I mean, the Phoenix Force, pretty dangerous. Cap and Iron Man would go hard trying to capture Hope Summers, and this would lead them into many conflicts with the X-Men. Iron Man actually goes to Xavier's school, Institute, Jean Grey's, whatever we're calling it at that point, and finds himself having to take on Rogue. And even though he points out that he's beaten her once before, she says that that was a different time. And then he also makes the mistake of attacking Gambit, which sends Rogue into a berserker-like rage, and she channels the She-Hulk's powers and just literally punches right through him. She just pummels him till all his armor is just bits on the ground. It's a good thing these armors are durable, / sometimes he's not actually in them, because otherwise he'd be dead several times over, which we're gonna get to later on. Dead Tony, that is. Don't mess with Rogue, or apparently more importantly, don't mess with Gambit.
Number 5, hashtag engaged. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017 and directed by John Watts. And it's amazing. I mean, this version of Spider-Man, this film version, this is Spider-Man. The older Tom Holland gets, the more and more this dude is gonna become Spider-Man. Like, he's gonna basically do what Robert Downey did with Iron Man. Like, it just works. This is it. We found the casting for this character. Done. Good luck to anybody else who wants to replace these guys. So one thing I hated about Spider-Man Homecoming was the very end of the movie. So Tony has this plan to introduce the world to Spider-Man, the newest Avenger, even showing him this fancy new Iron Spider suit as part of the pitch. Peter Parker, being all coy and smart, thinks that it's just a test and politely declines the offer. He says he would rather be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just to chill out, you know? So Tony reacts in a great way. He's all for it. He's like, yep, protect the little guys, I gotcha. And then after Peter walks away, we see Pepper Potts emerge from behind him, and in the background you can see all of these reporters and spectators. He really was planning on introducing a new Avenger. Also, after the events of Civil War, really? I always thought that was a weird time to be like, hey, remember on the news when this was a big deal? Well, here to introduce a high schooler with the ability to throw a bus, here's Spider-Man. He even comes with 4 metal arms and instant kill mode. Check it out. Not a great plan, no. So instead of introducing the new Avenger, he has to do something. I mean, those poor reporters, how are they ever gonna get over it? So he grabs an engagement ring and last second he proposes to Pepper Potts. Ah, damn. That's not a bad trick to have up your sleeve. Like, ah, damn, I forgot my school project. Maybe I'll just propose to somebody in class instead. That'll distract them.
Number 4, what if Spider-Man Back in Black? Which for a while I was like, that sounds like an album title. And then I remembered that it was AC/DC. I redeemed myself. This what if takes us back to, again, some events from Civil War. After Peter revealed his identity at Tony's behest, it did not go well for him and Aunt May ended up getting shot. Well, on this what if, it's Mary Jane who gets shot and Spider-Man goes right off the deep end, even though in main canon he was willing to sacrifice his marriage and memories of being with her to get Aunt May back. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. We're talking about Back in Black. In this comic, he decides that he's gonna put that black suit back on, he's gonna go get revenge, and he's out to kill. Well, he ends up getting into a fight with Iron Man, and he actually puts his hand over the repulsor ray, which causes it to reflect back on Tony. This takes him out, puts him down for the count, and Peter can go off on his killing spree. Just everybody in all the realities, Civil War.
Coming in at number 3, we have one of the most controversial Avengers storylines with the time Tony Stark replaced himself with a younger Tony. In the event known as The Crossing, a variant of the time-traveling villain, Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves throughout time. Over time, Tony's morals were slowly eroded until he was an active threat to the rest of the Avengers team, a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror. While his teammates would try and return him to the side of good, they eventually were forced to ally themselves with a younger Tony Stark from the past and permanently defeat the corrupted, older Iron Man. And while eventually this younger Tony would get retconned into being the true Tony Stark all along, this is still an intense example of just how dangerous Iron Man could be if he ever broke bad.
Number 2, Avengers X Sanction, aka Iron Man fights Cable, and you know you want to see that. Cable was definitely there when it came down to protecting Hope Summers, even though he was being overwhelmed by the techno-organic virus inside his body, but I mean that hasn't stopped him before and it doesn't stop him here. He was actually able to defeat Tony by using some future Stark technology that Tony had not invented yet, which of course he uses to mock Tony with to no end. He's even able to corrupt and overwhelm Tony's suit and then punches him right up into the Red Hulk. It's just never a great time to be Tony. Definitely not on this list. It was pretty cool design for Cable with this, with the reactor right in the center, his metal arm, just, you know, all the Cableness. And finally, in at number 1. I think you were waiting for it. I think you know what it is. That's right, it's Civil War 2. The event's so nice they did it twice. Here we have a lot of the same story beats being covered, but instead we have Iron Man in the role of Cap, and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers in the role of Iron Man. This one would center around the Minority Report dilemma. There should be stop crimes before they happen. Is that ethical or right? Well, after War Machine, who was at the time Carol's boyfriend, gets fridged, she is 100% for we need to stop all these crimes before they even happen, and she is off. This ultimately ends up with a giant climactic battle where she beats Tony to death. This is a moment that would cause a lot of contention, especially because there was a decent amount of contention surrounding Carol at this point in time anyway. So it was very quickly dealt with in the comics with, oh no, but Tony had an AI, and then that AI built a body, and we can all just pretend that that AI is Tony. Yes, let's do that. But yeah, Tony died hard.
Kicking off the list at number 10, making weapons. Now, of course, we see Tony Stark as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, but how exactly did Tony end up with all that cash money? Well, in the MCU, it is shown that Tony is running his father's company, of course being Stark Industries. Founded in 1940 by, of course, Howard Stark, the company is the best at what it does, that being selling innovative weapons to the United States Armed Forces. Ooh, now after being kidnapped by the Ten Rings and seeing the damage that his weapons cause in an up-close and very personal way, he of course seized all manufacturing of the weapons division. But the damage is done. It is later revealed in Avengers Age of Ultron that one of his Stark Industries manufactured missiles killed Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's parents. Not cool, Stark, not cool. Number 9, Hulk's field trip. In the MCU, the Hulk leaves the Avengers and the planet for that matter. See, after tossing Ultron out of the Quinjet, the Hulk lets himself fly away on autopilot, perhaps feeling that he's done too much damage and that his presence is causing more chaos than comfort. Well, in the comics, that basically happens, but it's done with haste. And it's done by none other than our very own Iron Man. So the Incredible Hulk issue 92, titled Planet Hulk, starts off with Reed Richards and Tony Stark talking to a monitor, and that monitor is sending footage to the Hulk in the ship. They explain to the Hulk their trick, which was to send the Hulk away while he was already in space for a previous mission with Fury. They say they've picked his destination very carefully, which is this lush planet full of vegetation and game, no intelligent life forms. Sounds pretty easy breezy for a creature like that, only of course he ends up on Sakaar, which is not that planet. It's very different. He's actually forced to become a gladiator and fight for his life. Now, the Hulk is out of the picture, right? Mission accomplished, we did it. Pew, gone, get that guy out of here. Wrong. Sakaar ends up being destroyed, and the Hulk, well, he's got some names to scratch off his get even list. So he heads back to Earth to find the Illuminati and seek revenge, including on Tony Stark. Number 8, he faked his own death. Iron Man issue 284 has quite an interesting cover. It shows Tony Stark wearing a suit, but like a boring kind of suit, in a casket. Ooh. And the text at the bottom of the page reads, "The death of Anthony Stark." It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom is like, ah yes, let us drink to the memory of a worthy opponent. Like, you know you're sick if Dr. Doom is like, yeah, cheers, I'll drink to you, that's cool. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, "This keycard will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD-ROM disc to my office and play it on the AV system." Wow, nothing says futurist rich billionaire like, take this CD. It'll help you. Okay, you have to like wipe it off first. Put it in. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it is pretty awesome. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to carry on for him. The world needs an Iron Man. And bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing that he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. Fair. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for him though. I mean, all that responsibility of being the new Iron Man, plus mourning your best friend, plus figuring out how to run a company, that's a lot of. So finally, he suits up and it's epic. Iron Man lives again, but it turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his spinal software problems. Ha! Gotti!
Number 7, Contest of Champions 2. Let them fight. There's something about that plot that just captures the imagination of fans. Just pitted together, normally on an island-style location and forced to duke it out. Well, this happened in Contest of Champions 2, and Iron Man was pitted against mutant powerhouse Psylocke. Now, at first they were pretty evenly matched because her psychic attacks weren't really working on him because his armor could see through them because she tried some psychological tricks. However, ultimately, because she had nanites inside of her, she was able to deliver this flurry of rapid-fire blows that were also backed up by her psionic abilities, and that took him out. If you're gonna use the Goku punch strategy, then the other person gotta be prepared. And sometimes your armor just can't take that, and this was one of those times.
Number 6, signing the Accords. Captain America Civil War was one of the most highly anticipated MCU movies, and it's pretty easy to figure out why. The two teams going against each other, I mean, even the poster, I was sold. The movie touches base on incidents like Charles Spencer. How many people have died because of the Avengers? I mean, sure, the whole fun is seeing somebody like Stark create this powerful villain and then use his own wit to defeat him with the help of the Avengers. But like, an asteroid basically hit Earth. I'm surprised more people didn't die in Sokovia, to be honest. So the government sees this and makes every superhero sign these Accords. And Tony Stark is all on board. He wants this to happen. He's pushing it. That way the government can control what they do or where they go. So it's not their name that's on the line. And if you don't sign, you retire. That's the deal. Now, of course, some team members don't agree, like, Captain America, who's all about freedom. Tony basically forced team members to sign up and go against his very own coworker, Steve Rogers. It's wild because we see both these character arcs changed in this movie for the both of them. We see Cap at the start, who wants to be this like team player and do everything by the books, in Captain America, the first Avenger. And now, by his third movie, he's an outlaw because Tony Stark didn't listen to him about Bucky. Now, Stark, when we first met him, he was cocky, he was rich, he wanted to punch his way through all the problems, even spying on S.H.I.E.L.D. the second he entered the helicarrier. But now, Tony wants everybody to sign and work for the government, all because he feels bad about creating Ultron and blowing it out of the sky. If he had never signed and listened to Cap, the crazy plan of Zemos wouldn't have actually worked. The band would still be together, and when Thanos came to Earth, they all would have smoked him before he even got hands of all the Infinity Stones. Ha! Rant over.
Coming in at number 5, we have Tony sacrificing himself by flying directly into a psionic storm. During a period of time in which Marvel was looking to reboot their comic book universe, the villain known as Onslaught was waging war against the entire 616 plane of existence. A combination of the darkest parts of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught was a creature of pure psychic energy that was only able to be defeated when the Hulk managed to finally rip open his armor. Unfortunately, the only way to stop Onslaught was the destruction of the universe, a dramatic sacrifice that Tony and the Fantastic Four decided to make as they flew directly into Onslaught's psionic body, ending their universe and kickstarting the highly controversial Heroes Reborn storyline.
Number 4, address shoutout. If there's somebody that wants to kill you, odds are you're just gonna stay away from that person, right? Like, you don't just give your address out to the public, let alone, I don't know, a terrorist. So after Happy gets put in the hospital due to one of the Mandarin's attacks on the Chinese theater, Tony Stark decides he's got a few choice words for the man responsible, the Mandarin. Iron Man 3, of course, didn't go so well with fans, given that the villain was just a fake out, and a fake out that people were actually really looking forward to seeing. I mean, the Mandarin's one of the coolest villains ever, and instead we got not the Mandarin. We got like a guy who turns red. But in his message to the Mandarin after visiting Happy in the hospital, Tony says how he's not afraid of the Mandarin, and he in fact should just die. Pal. Do you ever argue with somebody and then you take it like a step too far and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that? So Tony gives his address to everybody filming. There's a news crew, there are people on their phones. Like, dude, I get you're upset, but come on, use your smart billionaire head. So of course he gets attacked by the Mandarin because he's the Mandarin, and that's what villains do. They attack your Malibu mansions. What did you expect? And out of all of the suits Tony has access to, I'm talking his suit in the final battle for Avengers, he has the briefcase suit, the suitcase suit where he's like, out of all these things, no, this guy gears up with a prototype suit. And of course, he gets wrecked. That attack sets up the entire film. Could have easily been avoided if you just didn't give your address out on the news. Silly man.
Number 3, Superior Iron Man. Ah yes, evil Tony Stark, who was around after the Axis event, which was an event where you saw heroes and villains swapped. And everyone went back to normal except for Tony, who not everybody was aware was evil Tony for a little bit. Well, in issue 9 of the Superior Iron Man, he would end up battling it out with Pepper Potts, who was in some Iron Man armor of her own, which was deemed inferior Iron Iron Man armor. However, despite this, she was able to get the armor off of superior Tony Iron Man with an electromagnetic pulse, which was pretty satisfying, just that she knew all the kind of little secrets to dismantle him. Pepper's put up with a lot over the years. So much more in the comics. So much more.
Number 2, bad armor. In the Age of X limited series released back in 2011, we find Tony Stark in a rather odd predicament. See, at this point in the series, issue 2 I believe this happens, Tony is infected with this virus that is bonding him to his suit. You ever get like a piece of your sweater stuck to an arm hair and you're like, oh god, what's going on? And then you pull it and you're like, whew, that was close. It's kind of like that, except, you know, way worse. He's even going by the name Steel Corpse, which, I mean, as far as names go, it's pretty good. It's pretty fitting. Now, at this point, he was a mutant killer. It's a long story, but basically when Iron Man went to stop killing these mutants, in like the turning point of the comic, his suit, which was now literally part of him, started to control him against his will. And it's super scary how it looks on the page. Like, he looks so different and sick and gruesome. His body's not doing well at all handling the merge. So his armor starts to take aim at a group of mutants against his will, and he freaks out, begging Captain America to save them in a rather dark way, if you know what I'm saying. So Cap then takes out Iron Man with a shot to the head. Nice move. A little late. I would have done it sooner in this series, but definitely a good call. And finally, for number 1, Demon in a Bottle. So the classic storyline that was actually the center of attention for Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So in this movie we find Tony Stark, and at this point the arc reactor in his chest was powered with a palladium core. So time plus usage of the Iron Man suit equals poison. Not great. So we see Tony's life being ran down to the ground. We see his mental health start to decline, and at Tony's party he's hammered, he's peeing in his suit, and then to see a drunk superhero like Tony Stark acting like that, it wasn't random. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. The idea was loosely based on the Demon in a Bottle storyline from the comics. See, this character arc begins with Iron Man issue 120. We see Tony just slamming drinks. The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. And the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine? Because it's the middle of the day. And Tony responds with, nope, I'll do another martini. She even tries to cut him off. She tries to cut off Tony Stark. You know how fat that tip would have been? She says, sir, you've had like 3 already, are you sure? And he's like, yes ma'am, I am. Stating that he's drinking for 2, the other of course being his Iron Man persona. That's a lovely sign right there. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony flying through the air drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. The drunk tank himself even cheated on his girlfriend Bethany. Not cool. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side for the MCU storyline, thank God. Like, imagine if Tony tried to snap his fingers but he was too drunk. He's like, and I'm so hungry. Can we go home, please? Like, I gotta eat junior chickens right now.
Coming in at number 10, we have the time that Tony Stark faked his own death in order to keep his secret identity safe. During the Armor Wars event, which saw Iron Man trying to destroy all of the Stark Industries technology he had sold over the years, the iconic Avenger was put on the world's most wanted list for interfering with multiple nations' militaries. Since Tony Stark's alibi at the time was that Iron Man was actually his bodyguard, Tony had a fake biography and confession note written for a fictional man named Randall Pierce, and then faked this made-up bodyguard's death so that the Iron Man secret could be kept. Definitely an odd way to end an Iron Man crossover event, especially considering how public Tony would be with his secret identity just a few years down the road. Coming in at number 9, we have the time that Tony Stark erased his entire brain just to thwart Norman Osborn. Following an action-packed few years in the Marvel Universe that saw both Civil War and the Skrull invasion, the former Green Goblin had become the head of a new team of Dark Avengers. To protect all of the superheroes he had exposed during Civil War, Tony deleted all of the superhuman identities from the Superhero Registration Act, and implanted the data within a hard drive in his brain, making him Osborn's #1 target. To prevent the Green Goblin from gaining all of this knowledge, Tony eventually wiped his entire brain clean, relying on a backup of his brain to restore most of his usual memories once Norman had been safely locked up and taken care of. Coming in at number 8, we have the time that Iron Man was electrocuted by the God of Thunder himself. Tony Stark has made a lot of iffy choices in the comics, but few have been as disastrous as his attempt at a Thor clone. Intended to be a powerful deterrent against Cap's team during the Civil War event, this clone called Ragnarok quickly went out of control and caused the deaths of several heroes. Whenever the true Thor returned, he was furious at what Tony had done with his genetic code and fried every system in the suit of Iron Man armor, leaving Tony to walk back to Avengers HQ, humiliated and defeated, with one of the most decisive superhero smackdowns in comic book history, in a fight that Tony should be grateful he was still capable of walking away from.
And number 7, he created Ultron. Ultron can't see the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? That line is said by Wanda Maximoff in Avengers Age of Ultron. So Tony has created some amazing stuff. All of his suits, his innovative tech. Barf? That's the greatest thing. This dude knows what he's doing. But what if he created a supervillain? Ooh. So we find Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, right? Or just the idea at this point, rather. See, Tony had this idea since Avengers 1 that if he could create a suit of armor around the world, it would be a safer place, or rather create a robot that kicks ass, essentially. Something that just takes care of threats while the Avengers, I don't know, read a book, relax for once in their lives. Of course, one of the main elements helping them achieve this goal is the return of Loki's scepter. They think by studying the central power unit of the scepter, which ended up being the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, they can finally solve this puzzle and be safe. Tony ends up accidentally infusing the consciousness from the Mind Stone into this evil, jealous killer bot that mirrors many aspects of Tony Stark. So Ultron immediately starts to learn about what he is and who the Avengers are, and with his brain being the super AI, he decides they've all just gotta go. And by the end of the movie, we have a horribly damaged Sokovia with roughly 177 deaths. One of those deaths being Charles Spencer, a young American engineer killed in the final fight. Charles's mother ends up confronting Stark in Captain America Civil War, which ultimately leads to, drumroll.
Coming in at number 6, we have the time that Tony got full-on punched by Captain Marvel. Which, honestly, with the amount that Iron Man seems to get into conflict with other superheroes, we're surprised this hasn't happened more often. During the climax of the event Civil War II, neither Tony Stark or Carol Danvers were willing to budge on their positions over the use of a future-seeing Inhuman. And thus, Carol finally unleashed her full power to take Tony out with a single punch. And while at the time it seemed he was just knocked unconscious, it turns out that Carol's punch was so strong that it killed Tony's physical body, with his consciousness having to be backed up and placed inside a cloned replacement. Talk about learning how to handle a punch.
Number 5, the Winter Soldier. That's right, Bucky Barnes gets to make this list twice, but this time from the comic book universe. The return of Bucky Barnes was a huge event in comic book fandom because for a time he had been viewed as one of these sacred deaths, one of those characters that was not coming back. However, things changed, and his return arc was pretty well received. In Captain America 33, which followed Civil War, well, he was out to get some revenge on Tony because at the end of Civil War, Captain America was assassinated on the courthouse steps. So Bucky felt that this was Iron Man's fault, using the whole if you two hadn't been fighting and this hadn't happened, he wouldn't have been there kind of logic. So the two would get into it. And ultimately, Bucky would get the upper hand by pushing him into a set of power lines that would overload his suit, which, I mean, you would think that that would happen a lot more often. I feel like I should be taking notes. Bucky Barnes is all the simple tricks.
Coming in at number 4, we have the time Tony Stark intentionally stopped his own heart to save his life, because the logic behind that totally makes sense. Tony's had his fair share of bad relationships over the years, but few have ended as poorly as his romance with Kathleen Dare, a woman who took Tony's playboy ways incredibly personally and would eventually get back at Tony by shooting him in the chest. Paralyzed from this attack and suffering from severe nerve damage, Tony decided to stop his own heart so that he'd be placed into cryostasis until a solution could be found to his nerve damage. Unfortunately, Tony didn't tell many people what his plan was, causing many of his friends to believe he had died for good. Not great communication skills there, Iron Man. Not great.
And number 3, Superior Iron Man. So we go now to issue 1 of Superior Iron Man. The issue itself starts off mirroring the tech in Iron Man 3 in a way. Tony can control his suit and fight inside of it, but he's not actually in the suit. He's actually laying in a pool, sipping on margaritas. So his new Extremis armor was fascinating, so much so that Tony released it as like the smartphone app. Now this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. And it was great, but then Tony does the ultimate power move and says that the app was actually just a free trial, and in order to continue using it, you have to pay 100 smackaroos a day. Honestly, that's not a bad deal. I would pay that to become Iron Man, definitely. I'd be broke. You know what I would do? I would actually pay for the app, and then use the suit to rob banks, and then use that money to pay for the app. I'm a villain. I guess I just realized I'm definitely a villain. Just said it out loud. There we go.
Coming in at number 2, we have the time Iron Man and Captain America fought at the end of all existence. No, I'm not talking about the Civil War event, but rather a larger battle between the former friends during an event that saw the Marvel multiverse beginning to collapse in on itself during a storyline known as the Incursion. With both the Marvel and Ultimate universes destroying one another as they collided, Cap was shocked to learn that Tony had known about this imminent destruction for years and had been secretly trying to prevent it with the Illuminati rather than letting the rest of the Avengers know. This betrayal meant that Iron Man and Captain America spent their last moments in this universe punching one another, before eventually reality was reset into a new battle world. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time that Iron Man got decapitated by the partner of Thanos. The battle for the Infinity Gauntlet in the MCU might not have ended with Tony Stark's survival either, but at least in the movies, Tony got to be reassured that they won first. In the comic books, Iron Man has a lot less to do with Thanos' eventual defeat, as during the final battle against Thanos, he's apparently killed off-panel by the recently created partner of Thanos, Terraxia, offering the torn-off head of the Iron Man armor to Thanos as a romantic gift. And while Tony would be restored to life once Thanos was defeated and all of his evils undone, it's still wild just how thoroughly he was beaten by the partner of the Mad Titan.